before your first breath in the room, before the first word forms in your throat. Before you even decide who to greet, the verdict has already been entered into evidence. In the span of a few heartbeats, someone has catalogued you, filed you away, and made a ruling that will shape every subsequent moment you share with them. Not a judgment on your intellect, your background, or your moral standing, but a singular, brutal calculation about your availability. They require a handful of seconds. A handful of seconds to decode the way you carry yourself when you believe no one of consequence is looking. To register the precise temperature of your eye contact or the unmistakable chill of its absence. To measure the gap between the image you intend to project and the reality of how you land in a space. The predatory instinct does not deliberate. It does not sit across from you, weighing pros and cons. It initiates a behavioral audit so rapid, so deeply ingrained, that the individual performing it couldn't halt it if they tried. And within those first 5 seconds of your arrival, that audit spits out a binary result: green light or hard stop. This is the truth most men will navigate their entire lives without ever discovering. You will know it before this video ends. There was once a man who dedicated his life to observing how power actually identifies its opportunities. Not how the moral philosophers insisted it should, but how it truly does in the corridors of influence. He embedded himself in the courts of Renaissance Italy, watching the most lethal social operators of his age with their armor discarded. And he documented his findings with a clarity so unsettling, so brutally accurate, that the powerful figures of his day had only one recourse. They suppressed his work, not because Niccolò Machiavelli was mistaken, but because his accuracy was a liability. Because what he revealed about the mechanics of human assessment, selection, and exploitation was so uncomfortably precise that keeping it public felt like handing the keys to the castle to those who hadn't earned them. He wrote about target acquisition, about the specific, unconscious, involuntary cues that signal to the predatory psyche that an individual is a viable subject for approach. With the detached observation of a biologist cataloging species, not a moralist delivering a sermon. He wrote a single line that contains the entire architecture of what we're about to dissect. Men are so simple and so much creatures of circumstance that the deceiver will always find someone ready to be deceived. He wasn't indicting stupidity. He was identifying signal, the specific, subconscious behavioral frequencies that broadcast to the predatory mind, not just that deception is an option, but that it's a low-risk endeavor. 3 signals. Read in the time it takes a traffic light to change. Without your permission, without your awareness. And it's almost certain that one of them is currently active in your presence. Let's dissect what that initial assessment is actually hunting for. Because the common assumption is that predatory behavior wears a mask. Most men believe the person running this scan on them will look like a villain radiating hostility, projecting threat, triggering the instinctual alarms. They don't. The predator in your environment does not announce its presence with a siren. It doesn't arrive with aggression or overt malice, the very things your nervous system was built to detect. It arrives with warmth, with a disarming interest, with a quality of attention that feels like being seen rather than being studied. And while you're basking in that feeling of being seen, the audit is already running. It runs on 3 specific data points. Not 20, not a dozen. 3. Because the predatory assessment isn't about comprehensive understanding. It's about ruthless efficiency. It's not seeking to know everything about you. It's hunting for the specific behavioral signatures that answer one question with total clarity. Is this individual a safe proposition? Not safe in the physical sense. Safe in the predatory sense. Will this person resist? Will they push back against encroachment? Will they enforce consequences? Will they recognize the encroachment before it's already concluded? Or will they absorb the imposition and rationalize it away as life? 3 signals provide that answer in a handful of seconds. 1. The texture of your silence. The first trait the predatory mind reads has nothing to do with your vocabulary, your attire, your social media presence, or any conscious choice about your persona. It is the texture of your silence. Specifically, whether you possess any. Notice what happens when a man enters a room, not the one who blusters in, but the one who slips in quietly. Watch his physicality in the first moments before he's secured his social footing. Does he scan? Does his field of vision dart immediately, seeking anchors, seeking familiar faces, seeking any confirmation that he's permitted to be there? Does his frame contract or adjust, recalibrating based on the energy the room returns to him? Or does he simply arrive? Does he enter the space with the same gravity a mountain occupies a landscape without negotiating its right to exist, without needing the environment's acknowledgement before settling into its own weight? These are two distinct categories of men, and the predatory mind registers the distinction in a fraction of the time it takes to blink. The man who scans is transmitting one piece of data above all others. His internal equilibrium is contingent on external feedback. He requires the room to grant him something: recognition, warmth, validation, before he can fully inhabit his own presence. And a man whose internal equilibrium is contingent on external input is a man whose internal equilibrium can be manipulated by controlling that input. That's the entire predatory calculus, distilled into the texture of your silence. This is known in behavioral analysis as baseline autonomic assessment. It's the reading of a person's core nervous system state through their microscopic behavioral reactions to environmental stimuli in the opening moments of a social encounter. It operates beneath the threshold of conscious awareness for both the observer and the observed. The predatory mind doesn't choose to assess you, it assesses you as reflexively as you breathe. You don't choose to broadcast the signal, you broadcast it as reflexively as you breathe. Reflect on the last time you entered a gathering where you knew no one. What did your body do? Where did your focus land? What happened to your posture in the seconds before someone acknowledged your existence? If your physical presence was seeking something from the environment before it settled, you were broadcasting. And anyone watching, anyone who has trained themselves to read this specific signal, received that broadcast before you'd cleared the doorway. Marcus Aurelius, emperor, Stoic philosopher, and the most powerful individual of his era, scribbled something in his private journals that reads less like lofty philosophy and more like a tactical field manual for this exact moment. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He wasn't prescribing meditation for spiritual growth. He was articulating silence as a strategic asset. The emperor, who carried his own silence into every chamber he entered, could not be destabilized by what the chamber gave or withheld. He didn't need the room's acknowledgement. He arrived with his own. The predatory personalities circulating in the imperial courts of Rome never succeeded in manipulating Marcus Aurelius the way they did other rulers. Not because he was more intellectually formidable, but because he was more silent. And silence communicates something to the predatory audit that no measure of intelligence or external success can replicate. It communicates this person's internal state is not accessible from the exterior. And a person whose internal state is not accessible from the exterior cannot be directed from the exterior. A man who cannot be moved is invisible to the predatory mind. The predatory audit receives this transmission and concludes, high resistance. Proceed elsewhere. Now, let's pinpoint the precise manifestation of this silent signal that most men overlook because it doesn't occur in grand, dramatic moments. It occurs in the micro-moments. You're in a meeting and someone makes a comment that's subtly dismissive. Not aggressive, subtle. The kind of remark with complete plausible deniability. It could have been an accident, it could have been a calculated jab. Your posture shifts. Your jaw tightens. Your reply comes a half-beat faster than the flow of conversation required. You didn't move dramatically, you moved microscopically, but the predatory observer in the room noted the movement because the movement answered the question. The question was, can this stimulus move him? The answer was, yes. And yes means there is a control panel, and the predatory mind just located the first switch. Silence is not rigidity. It's not a blank stare. It's not the performance of someone who's learned to repress their reactions. The man who represses is not silent. His repression leaks through micro-expressions, through vocal tension, through the timing of his responses. Suppression is legible to anyone who knows the code. True silence is the absence of need. It's the specific quality of presence belonging to a man who is not waiting for the room to provide anything because he already possesses everything he requires internally. That man cannot be moved because nothing external holds enough weight to alter what's internal. That man does not broadcast. That man becomes invisible to the predatory audit in the most valuable way possible, not because he's hiding, but because the audit finds nothing usable. Build that silence. Not as a performance, but as the genuine byproduct of a man who has decided that external events no longer govern his internal state. Because the first signal, the texture of your silence, determines whether the audit terminates in the opening seconds or proceeds to the next phase. 2. The trajectory of your focus. The second signal is more subtle to detect and far more costly when it's broadcasting. It's the trajectory of your focus. Specifically, whether your attention is projected outward in a way that signals scarcity or whether it's self-contained in a way that signals sufficiency. Let's make this concrete, because this is the signal most men are transmitting at full volume without a single conscious thought. When you walk into a room full of people you want to impress, where does your focus go? When you're speaking to someone whose good opinion matters to you, what does your physicality do? When you're in a social context where your status feels uncertain, what does your attention seek? If your focus moves outward toward approval, toward recognition, toward the reactions of those around you, you are broadcasting a signal the predatory audit translates to a single word: available. Not available in the social sense. Available in the predatory sense. Available means this person's internal economy is running a deficit. They require something from the external environment that they are not generating internally. And a man who requires something from the external environment can be controlled by managing his access to that thing. This is what psychological literature terms the approval-seeking behavioral signature. It's the constellation of micro-behaviors that signal to the social environment that an individual's sense of stability and worth is dependent on external validation. It shows up in predictable patterns. The laugh that comes too easily, the response that arrives too quickly, the glance that checks for approval after a statement, the posture that subtly angles toward the person whose judgment is most valued. Every single one of these behaviors is invisible to the man performing them. Every single one is transparent to the predatory mind observing them. Consider this scenario. You make a statement in a group setting. After you finish, do your eyes shift to a specific person to gauge their reaction? Not obviously subtly. A fraction of a second. That fraction of a second is the entire broadcast. In that moment you've communicated, I need this person's approval for my statement to feel legitimate. Their approval is a resource I depend on. Withholding their approval is a lever that can produce predictable behaviors in me. The predatory mind notes the fraction of a second. Notes the person your eyes went to. Files both. Now they know the approval source. Now they know the leverage point. Now they know that managing your relationship with that specific person or simply performing the credible withdrawal of their approval will produce the behaviors they want from you. All from a split-second eye movement you weren't aware of making. You're thinking of a specific person right now. Possibly at work. Possibly in your social circle. Possibly closer. Someone whose opinion of you carries more weight than it should. Someone whose reaction to what you say or do alters your internal state disproportionately to the actual stakes. That person holds leverage over you. Maybe they know it. Maybe they don't. But if a predatory observer is present in your environment, that leverage has been catalogued. And this is where the implications deepen, because the outward focus signal isn't broadcast only through your eyes. It's broadcast through your entire behavioral pattern across the hours and days surrounding that person. You work harder when they might be watching. You perform better when they might be present. Your output, your discipline, your concentration, your standards fluctuate based on whether that specific person will witness the result. Consider what that signifies. It means your optimal performance isn't available to you independently. It means your best is a conditional output triggered by external observation rather than internal standard. It means the presence or absence of one specific person dictates the quality of your work. That's not ambition. That's dependency wearing ambition's clothing. And the predatory observer who has identified that person, the one whose presence activates your peak performance, now holds a remote control for your output. Show you that person's approval, watch your performance spike. Withdraw that person's attention, watch your performance dip. Create ambiguity about that person's opinion of you, watch you become distracted, anxious, and exponentially easier to manage. You've been doing this your whole career, calling it motivation. It's not motivation. It's an exposed circuit, and any predatory personality in your professional sphere is capable of touching that circuit, the moment it serves their purpose. Now consider the version most men find hardest to acknowledge because it doesn't occur in the office. It doesn't occur in public. It occurs in private at home. The way you behave differently when someone you're afraid of losing is watching. The version of yourself you perform for the relationship you're most invested in preserving. The way your energy, your availability, your warmth, your effort, your attention is highest precisely when you're most insecure about the relationship's stability and lowest when you feel secure. The predatory personality in an intimate partnership doesn't need sophisticated tools to read this pattern. When they are warm toward you, your focus flows outward, giving, accommodating, performing. When they are cold, your focus chases reaching, over-explaining, over-providing. They've just discovered that the volume dial for your effort is in their hands. They didn't install the dial. You installed it. Through every moment you allowed their emotional temperature to govern your behavioral output. This is known as variable reinforcement dependency. It's the specific psychological condition where an individual's behavior becomes governed by inconsistent reward patterns from an external source, creating an escalating cycle of effort designed to stabilize the reward. It's the same mechanism that makes a slot machine addictive. The unpredictability of the payout doesn't reduce the behavior, it intensifies it. The cold shoulder followed by warmth, the withdrawal followed by affection, the distance followed by closeness. Each cycle produces more dependency than the last. Each cycle amplifies the outward direction of your focus. Each cycle makes the dial in their hands more potent. You thought the cycle was communication problems. It was a power structure. You thought the inconsistency was their damage. It was your dial being calibrated. Let's talk about how this looks from the outside, because this is the perspective that will make you never unsee it. A man broadcasting outward-focused energy in a social environment resembles a star that has forgotten it is a star. He is generating enormous heat and light, his enthusiasm, his effort, his engagement, all of it directed at a specific target or set of targets, waiting to see what comes back. The problem is stars don't wait to see what comes back. Stars generate heat regardless of whether the planets appreciate it. The planets don't make the star brighter or dimmer. The star's output is governed internally, not externally. The moment a star starts waiting to see what comes back, it has stopped being a star and started being a searchlight. And searchlights communicate one thing above all else. They are searching for something they lack. The predatory audit sees the searchlight and notes the absence. Whatever the searchlight is seeking, approval, validation, confirmation, desire, is the leverage point. Find what the searchlight is seeking and you find the control mechanism. The man who is a star, whose output is governed internally, who generates warmth without requiring the room to reflect it, whose focus doesn't fluctuate based on what the environment provides, that man communicates something to the predatory audit that terminates the second signal. He's not searching for anything, and a man who isn't searching for anything cannot be controlled through the promise of providing it. A star does not wait for the planets to shine. This is why Machiavelli was so precise about the relationship between need and authority. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most people misinterpret this as instruction on how to treat others. It's not. It's an observation on the mechanics of power. The man who is loved is the man whose love can be withdrawn. The man who is feared is the man who doesn't require the emotional response of the room to sustain his position. Love, in Machiavelli's framework, is a form of dependency. The lover is dependent on being loved in return, and dependency is a vulnerability. The person who controls access to what you love controls access to your behavior. Fear, in his framework, isn't cruelty. It's the specific quality of presence that communicates, "This man needs nothing from you." And a man who needs nothing from you cannot be controlled by managing that need. The second signal, the trajectory of your focus, tells the predatory audit whether you are a man who needs something from the environment or a man who brings something to it. Those are not the same man. They are not assessed the same way. They are not targeted the same way. The man whose focus moves outward, seeking, checking, requiring, that man is telling the predatory audit that the leverage exists. It simply needs to be located and applied. The man whose focus is self-contained, whose presence communicates that he arrived full, that the environment can offer him nothing he doesn't already possess, that his adequacy is not a question, the environment has the authority to answer, that man terminates the second signal before the audit can complete it. And without the second signal, the audit has nothing to work with. Here's the version that will unsettle you, because it's not just the obvious social situations. It's every time you check your phone in a social setting to see if someone replied. It's the way your energy shifts when you enter a space where someone you want to impress is present. It's the way your voice modulates slightly, becoming more careful, more measured when you're speaking to someone whose opinion you're concerned about. All of it is broadcasting. All of it is visible. All of it is being read. The solution isn't performance. The solution is investment. The genuine, sustained investment in your own purpose, your own standards, your own internal assessment of yourself that is so consuming and so authentic that the room's assessment becomes genuinely irrelevant. Not performed irrelevance. Genuine irrelevance. The kind that belongs to a man who has somewhere more significant to be than inside the approval cycle of the people around him. Build that purpose, not because someone is watching, because without it, your focus will always move outward. Always seek, always broadcast. And as long as it broadcasts, the predatory minds in your environment will keep receiving the signal and keep knowing exactly what to offer you to get exactly what they want. Build the purpose. Contain the focus. Become the star. Because the second signal the trajectory of your focus tells the predatory audit not just that you can be controlled, but precisely how. 3. Your response to provocation. Before the predatory mind commits to an approach, it runs one final evaluation. Not passive this time. Active. It tests you. Not overtly, not in a way that announces itself as a test. In a way that retains complete plausible deniability. A casual remark that could have been innocuous. A minor boundary infringement that could have been accidental. A brief interruption that could have been thoughtless rather than intentional. The test is designed to appear as normal social static. What the test is actually measuring is your response to low-grade social pressure. Specifically, do you register the test? Do you respond to it? And if you respond, how? The predatory mind is not looking for you to react. Reaction is the worst possible response and simultaneously the most common one. The man who reacts to the test, who visibly shifts, who responds faster or louder or more defensively than the moment warranted, has just provided the most valuable piece of data in the entire audit. He has demonstrated that low-grade stimuli can alter his behavior. This is called probe testing in behavioral intelligence. The deliberate introduction of low-stakes social stimuli to measure a target's response threshold and reaction pattern. It's not a conscious strategy for most predatory personalities. It's instinctual. The same way a predator in the wild will probe the perimeter before committing to an approach. The instinct operates beneath conscious decision-making. They aren't choosing to test you. They're testing you the way water tests a surface automatically, continuously, finding the path of least resistance. Let me outline the specific forms this test takes. You've already experienced the casual interruption. You're speaking. Someone cuts across you, not aggressively, casually the way you would cut across someone whose input you considered optional. How do you respond? Do you stop? Do you trail off? Do you push through? Do you address the interruption? What you do in that moment tells the predatory mind everything about your tolerance for boundary infringement. If you stop and defer, you've communicated that your contributions can be interrupted without consequence. That's a boundary without enforcement. And a boundary without enforcement isn't a boundary. It's a suggestion. The dismissive remark. Someone says something mildly diminishing about a stance you hold or a decision you've made. Not hostile, casual the way you would dismiss something that doesn't merit serious consideration. What do you do? Do you over-explain? Do you defend? Do you attempt to change their mind? Every additional sentence you produce in defense of yourself beyond the first clean response is additional evidence that their opinion of you has access to your internal state. You're telling them the dismissal landed. You're telling them the dismissal matters. You're telling them that if they want to produce a specific behavior in you, dismissal is a reliable lever.
The Schrödinger's joke.
The comment delivered as humor but containing a real diminishment, said with a smile, plausible deniability fully intact. If you react, you're being overly sensitive. If you don't react, the diminishment stands. Most men react, not because they're weak, but because the comment was designed to make non-reaction feel like capitulation. The design is the trap. The correct response to the Schrödinger's joke is neither laughter nor defensiveness. It's the response of a man who received the message beneath the joke and communicates without announcement, without drama, simply through the texture of his response that he received it and is not perturbed by it. The response of a man who has been tested before and doesn't need to announce that he recognized the test because the recognition is already visible in how he responds to it. Think about the Roman Emperor Hadrian, one of the most politically sophisticated rulers in imperial history. His court was populated with men who ran these tests constantly, probing for vulnerabilities, measuring response thresholds, identifying who could be moved and how. Hadrian survived and thrived not because he was aggressive or paranoid, but because he possessed the specific quality that renders probe testing useless. He was consistent. His response to a test was indistinguishable from his response to genuine interaction. His response to a boundary infringement was indistinguishable from his response to an accident. His response to a diminishment was indistinguishable from his response to a compliment, not because he failed to register the difference, but because his internal state was anchored so deeply that the difference didn't produce a visible differential in his behavior. The probe test only works when the target responds differently to the test than they respond to normal interaction. The differential is the data. When there's no differential, there's no data. When there's no data, the assessment cannot complete. Hadrian's consistency wasn't a technique. It was the authentic behavioral expression of a man so thoroughly anchored in his own identity and purpose that the attempts to shift him simply found no purchase. And the predatory minds in his court and there were many learned over time that testing him was unproductive, not because he punished them for it, but because he simply didn't provide the differential they needed to work with. Become the man who provides no differential, not through suppression, not through performance, but through the genuine, sustained development of an internal anchor so solid that the tests, however well designed, however precisely targeted, simply don't reach it. The man without a differential is the most formidable man in any room he enters, not because he's aggressive, but because he's unreadable. And unreadable means unusable. And unusable means the predatory audit returns one result and one result only. Not this one. Now step back and observe what these three signals share: the texture of your silence, the trajectory of your focus, your response to provocation. Every single one communicates the same thing to the predatory audit running on you in the opening seconds. Where is the access point? The predatory mind isn't evaluating your character, your intelligence, your achievements. It's asking one question about your behavioral architecture. Where is the entry point? Where is the stimulus that alters your state? Where is the dependency that can be managed? Where is the threshold that, once located, produces the predictable response? Three signals. Three answers to the same question. Three pieces of evidence about whether a control panel exists and where it's located. The man who has done the work, who has cultivated the silence, who has contained the focus, who has eliminated the differential, does not possess a visible control panel. And the predatory audit, which runs automatically, continuously, and beneath conscious decision-making in the minds of those around you, receives one conclusion about that man. The calculation isn't "this one will stop me." The calculation is "there's nothing here to work with." And that conclusion terminates the audit before it can escalate into an approach. If what's been laid out here produced that specific, cold recognition, the recognition of seeing a signal you've been broadcasting named clearly for the first time, like this video, not as a favor, because it means this content found the right person. Subscribe if you haven't. This channel isn't here to comfort you. It's here to provide the kind of precision that changes how you operate in every space you enter. Like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more. Now, what I've given you today is what this platform allows. There's a level beneath this. The specific counter-protocols for each of the three signals. The exact behavioral and psychological maneuvers that not only eliminate the signals, but actively communicate to predatory personalities that the audit has been run and the result is "do not proceed." The deeper mechanics of how predatory minds are identified before they complete the approach. The offensive application of everything covered here: how the man who understands these signals uses that understanding to read every room he walks into. With the precision of someone who knows exactly what the audit is looking for and can therefore see it running in real time on everyone around him. Those frameworks exist behind the join button below. Inside is a small, deliberately selective circle of men who have decided that moving through the world as a legible target is no longer acceptable. Men who want the complete system, not the introduction. The full architecture at the level of detail this format can't contain. The men inside already know why they pressed it. The circle stays small. That's what makes it worth being inside. You stayed until the end of a video that demanded something from you. Not passive consumption, active confrontation with your own behavioral signals. That's not common. Guard that capacity the same way this video instructed you to guard everything else. The audit is running right now. In every room, on every man who enters it. The only remaining question is what it returns when it runs on you. Make sure it returns one answer, not this one. I'll see you in the next one.